Hello, I am Dano and welcome to week 2 of learning how to linocut. This week we're going to learn how to transfer images to your lino block and how to properly line up your linocut prints. Then we'll use those skills to make the 2 free projects I have provided for you in the description box below. If you missed it, catch up on part 1 of the linocut series right here. Transferring images. It's nice to have an image to trace when you're carving your linocut blocks, and some artists will choose to draw directly on the lino. But if you've drawn an image on paper or digitally, you won't want to redraw it onto your lino block, so you'll have to transfer the image. The 2 methods that I'm going to show you work best with images that are smaller than a letter-sized paper. The first method is pencil transfers, and it works best with simpler images. I've seen different versions of the pencil method, but the one that I like makes sure that you don't have to flip your image to make sure that it doesn't print backwards. Cut out a piece of tracing paper and tape it to your image. Trace over the image with a pencil using a soft pencil and a fair amount of pressure. Once traced, flip your tracing paper so that it is pencil side down onto your lino and tape that down. Rub the back of the tracing paper to transfer the pencil to your block. You can use anything with a hard, smooth edge to do this. I like to use this bone folder. When the image is transferred, you might want to go over it with a marker afterwards, otherwise your hand might smudge it while you're carving. The second method is print transfers, where an image printed from a computer is transferred to the lino block using either Modge Podge, Acetone, or a clothes iron. Important to note, there are 2 kinds of printers, inkjet printers and laser printers. The quickest way to tell the difference is that a laser printer will use toner where an inkjet printer doesn't. I saw a lot of conflicting information online on whether these techniques work for laser printed images or inkjet printed images, so I tried out both to see which one would work. The Modge Podge method worked for both the inkjet and the laser printed image. Paint a thin layer of Modge Podge onto your block and then place the paper image side down on the block. Smooth out the paper with the bone folder or the edge of a credit card and then let it dry completely, about 15 to 20 minutes. Once it's dry, take a cloth or a paper towel and lightly dampen the paper. Rub gently with your fingers until the paper comes off and only the image remains, wetting more if necessary. Now this worked for both types of printers, but it wasn't my favorite overall technique for transferring. It's a really fine line between not enough water to make it work and too much water that you smudge the image off to. Additionally, the Modge Podge leaves a sort of film on the lino, which I found kind of messed with my carving techniques. The acetone method only works with laser printed images. Place the image face down on the block and, using a cotton ball or swab soaked with acetone, dab the back of the paper. Make sure that all areas of the paper gets wet and that you don't move the paper around. Wait for it to dry, it only takes a minute or 2, and then peel it off. This method works fairly well, but if you use too much acetone, your image will start to bleed. It does stick to the lino pretty well, but you might want to go over it with a marker as well, just so it doesn't smudge while you're carving. The clothes iron method only worked for the laser printed image as well, but overall it was my favorite technique as it's fairly quick and not messy. First, the image goes down onto the block and then a layer of parchment paper to protect the paper and the lino from the heat. I had my iron on a low-medium setting, but you may have to play around with your own iron to get the right temperature and the right amount of time to iron. Apply pressure and keep the iron moving. After 30 to 45 seconds, check to see if the image has transferred. If it hasn't, repeat for another 30 to 45 seconds. Let cool and then peel off the paper. Again, you may want to go over it with marker, especially if it's a larger piece. Lining up prints. You've transferred your image and you've carved out your stamp, and now it's time to print. Depending on the project, you could just eyeball where it's going to go, but if you want it to be nice and centered onto your paper, here are the methods that I like. These both work best for one color prints where you want to center your image on a piece of paper. Having a grid like this cutting mat is super helpful for getting everything lined up nicely. For the first method, lay down your paper and mark the top and bottom left-hand sides with something like washi tape or masking tape. Mark the center of the Linocut block that you're printing along the width and along the height. Then mark where the center of your paper will be on your washi tape. When you place your block to print, make sure these marks line up so you know that your print will be centered. Now you can just use the tape marks to line up your paper, but for a little more accuracy, you can make this paper pocket hinge thing. Take 2 pieces of paper and fold them in half. Align them at 90 degrees and then tape it on the back to create this little corner pocket. Line up the pocket along the top of where you measured out your paper and tape along the left edge. Trim if needed to clear the lino block. Now you'll be able to slide your paper into the little pocket, and then when you place the paper, it'll be lined up perfectly. The second method is similar but uses 2 L-shaped pieces of cardboard or cardstock. These are actually a photo mat that I cut apart, and they work really well for this method. Start by taping down one of the L's. This is where your Linocut block is going to sit. You will be layering the other L on top. To determine where, measure how much longer your paper is than your block. Divide that number by 2 and use that to measure down from the bottom edge of the first L. Make a mark. Then measure how much wider your paper is than your block. Divide that number by 2 and use that to measure to the left of the first L's edge. Make a mark. Now line up the second L with those marks and tape down. This will be where your paper sits. To print, ink up your block and line it up into the first L. Line up your paper with the second L and press down, and you will get a nice and centered print. Now you know how to transfer images and how to line up your prints properly, so let's put those skills to use with a few projects. First up is the Read Bookmark. Download the free printable and transfer to your Linocut block using the method of your choice. I decided to go with the laser printed iron transfer. Now that it's carved, I'm grabbing a piece of watercolor paper that is 2 inches by 5 inches, and I'm going to use some green watercolor to paint a little background. Finally, I'm using the tape method to line up my print, using the little paper slot to line up my bookmark and printing it with black ink. And there is my final bookmark. Next up is the thank you card. I went with a pencil outline method for this transfer, going over it with a marker so it doesn't smudge while I carve. After carving my block, I am using the L-shaped cardboard method to line this print up. And there's the thank you card. And that brings us to the end of week 2 of Linocut printing. You can use those 2 free projects or make up your own to practice transferring Linocuts and lining up your prints. Next week, we close out the series with multicolor prints and advanced tips and tricks. In the meantime, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Dano Does Things, and head over to Instagram for more behind the scenes and tips and tricks. Thanks for watching. Bye.